Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Koenig. I want to welcome you to Somatics for you and our class today, Somatic Movement and Anatomy. The props you'll need are, we're going to start in a chair, a regular chair. When we go to the floor shortly, you'll need whatever pillows you usually need behind the head, under the knees. You'll need your floor mat or whatever you put on the floor. And our theme today is continuing the theme of enhancements, but we are going to be focusing quite a lot on the obliques today, the internal and external obliques. So let's start with just here we are in sitting. I'm going to turn to the slides in a moment, but just really get in the habit every time you sit down, go through a little bit of a posture routine so that you have a nice long back. You're sitting on your sits bones, your feet are on the floor, your ankles are under your knees, you've got a spacious pelvic floor, you're not holding your legs really tight, and they don't necessarily have to be real spread out, but your bent legs to your pelvis, it's comfortable. And I like to go, since I learned this about just a spacious pelvic floor, it really helps me not to tighten my adductors, which is a pattern of mine. And this is really helping me to break it in a seated position, which I'm in a lot at the computer. Long back, your head comes away from your pelvis. You don't do something to make that happen. You just make sure that in a thought form, in internal directions to you, your head is coming away from your pelvis. That will help to lengthen your back. Your low back is comfortable. You're neither arched nor curled. Your neck is long. You're basically looking at the horizon if you can, so that if you're looking up, you're contracting your suboccipital muscles at the top of the neck. Very, very, very bad for a lot of reasons. All your cranial nerves come out there. And it's a habit because a lot of us have fields in our glasses, and you have to look in the lower field, which makes you tip your head up to read for a lot of people. And then that hyperextends the neck. So you want to, as much as possible, be able to adjust and come out into a long neck. So you're trying to focus on that internal vertical axis from the center of your pelvic floor to your crown. And then you're just breathing comfortably. Okay, I want to go right to screen share. Oops, I don't even have it on the first one, but I'll get it there. And I need to just minimize this. Hold on. There we go. And I need to bring this up. Okay, so this just gives you the statistics of this is today's class. And so we've seen this picture many times, or some of us have. These are your oblique muscles. These are your external obliques. They are higher come up higher on the ribs to rib 5. This is from Travel. The internal obliques come up a little lower from rib 8. There's so many things to notice. We're going to look at the somatic center, the rib cage, and the pelvis in terms of the obliques. So here's the center of the front of your body. It's called the linea alba. And under this sheet of fascia, you have one on each side. This is your navel, is your rectus abdominis. Your external obliques, the direction of the fibers has a downward diagonal slant, and it is basically toward your opposite hip. Now, this external oblique, which is your left external oblique, the meat of the muscle stops here, but this is the tendon, this large flat tendon called an aponeurosis. The obliques attach into this tendon, and by the tendon, your obliques on the left go all the way to your midline. And the right external obliques, it's the same idea. They go by their tendon all the way to midline. What's interesting is well, let me go back to the rib cage. So the obliques are attached to all these ribs. They go completely through the somatic center, and they attach to a good part of your iliac crest, which is the ilium bone of the pelvis. Now, the internal obliques have a slant in the opposite direction. So whereas the external obliques turn you towards your opposite hip for the rotational function, your internal obliques turn you towards the same side. This turns you towards the opposite side. The external obliques, internal obliques turns you toward the same side. And it's turning your rib cage, your somatic center, and your pelvis. Now, these more vertical fibers, at a certain amount of these fibers are a little bit more vertical, and they do the lateral bending or lateral flexion function when they work together. Now, where do they end in the back? Well, this is what is so interesting. Let me go to this picture for a moment. So here you see a typical picture of the back. Here's the spine. Now, you have this large piece of fascia. It's called the thoracolumbar aponeurosis in the back. Here's your latissimus dorsi. We really looked at that last time. When you take off the latissimus dorsi, this large flat tendon has many layers. And the external oblique and the internal oblique by their tendon, which is this thoracolumbar aponeurosis. This is even a few fibers of the external oblique and a few fibers of the internal oblique. These muscles attach into this tendon in the back. Therefore, by its tendon, each of these obliques go from midline in the front to midline in the back. This picture is, this is the A picture of the internal obliques. Here's where the meat of the muscle stops in the front. This is that big aponeurosis in the front. Let me just go back to here. This is this aponeurosis. And in the back, the meat of the muscle of the internal obliques goes to here, but by its tendon, it comes into here. Both the internal obliques and the external obliques completely surround your certain amount of lower ribs, sometimes as high as rib 5, completely surrounds your somatic center, and it almost completely surrounds your iliac crest, the top of both ilium bones. So we have an extraordinary, when we are rotating, our attention is often to the front of our body, but that rotation is going all the way around you. I'm going to come out of screen share in a moment, and we're going to do a couple of movements in the chair. But before we go on, I want to just look at some views. We looked at the latissimus dorsi in this view last week. Here's serratus anterior. Here's the external obliques. Here's the large flat aponeurosis. Underneath is the muscle of the rectus abdominis. Here are some pectoralis muscles. Here's with the arm held high. You can see the armpit. Here's the serratus. The serratus anterior is a shoulder girdle muscle. The obliques are a trunk muscle. They turn the whole trunk. The anterior serratus, along with the rhomboids, which is its opposite, they are bringing the shoulder girdle, the scapula, toward the spine, rhomboids, serratus anterior lengthening, or the shoulder, the scapula away from the spine, that serratus anterior. Now this muscle is contracting. Both the serratus and the rhomboids attach at the medial border. At the medial border, they've retracted the scapula. So we have really very interesting, and I'm gonna try to remember to bring in shoulder girdle, which includes the scapula when we do a couple of chair movements. I just want to call your attention, because we are going to be including the pelvis. I want to remind you, this is the sacroiliac joint from looking anteriorly from the front. And here it is looking from the posterior or back of the body. Your sacroiliac joint is where your sacrum and your ilium bone on each side come together. This is a joint. It is not a voluntary joint, but there's movement in that joint in all three planes: flexion, extension, lateral flexion, and rotation. There's a little bit of movement as other muscles move each hemi-pelvis. As other muscles move each hemi-pelvis, you have movement to some degree, or should have movement to some degree, not over movement, just the right amount of movement in the sacroiliac joints and in your pubic joints, pubic joint here and pubic joint here. Each hemi-pelvis, here's the sacrum in here, you can't see it, it's invisible, draw it in your mind. Each hemi-pelvis has movement at the sacroiliac joint, at the pubic joints, at the hip joint, at where the lumbar spine comes and meets the sacrum, and at the two hip joints. Lots of things move the pelvis. If you're just moving a leg and the pelvis is still, then you're moving your leg, your thigh, your whole leg from the hip joint. But if you move your leg and it also moves your pelvis, then you're moving from the hip and the pelvis. I also want to just show you a picture of a propeller, because we're going to do the propeller move from the side. Can be a challenging move, but let me orient you to an analogy with our body. Here's the somatic center. Here's the upper trunk and the rib cage, and here's your lengthened long arm when it's held out straight. Here's your pelvis, here's somatic center, here's pelvis, here's your long leg when it's stretched out long. When you're on your side, or really in any position, and you have a long arm and a long leg, you can move your long arm and your long leg from your somatic center without hardly engaging anything at the hip joints. And you're going to see what that means. We are actually going to engage a little bit of rotational movement, but we're not going to swing the leg back and forth. Let me come out of screen share. Let's go back to this image for a moment, because we're going to start with the obliques. And many times what we do, remember okay, let me come this way. The external obliques start pretty high, about at the nipple line. And if you put the palm of it doesn't matter which side you do, if you put the palm of your hand on the flat of a little bit, I'm a little bit to the front, but I'm kind of to the side. Your thumb, my thumb and maybe my index finger are on my lower ribs. I can feel down here, I can feel my iliac crest. And in the soft tissue in here, I feel my somatic center. I'm bridging rib cage, ilium, iliac crest, and the belly part, the meat of the muscle between the lower ribs and the ilium bone when I do this. Now, put your hand on one of your sides like this. You're bridging lower rib cage, somatic center, and iliac crest. Now, you're going to turn in the direction of your fingers. You're going to turn towards your opposite hip. You're going to turn towards your opposite hip. There's a slight downward angle. That's your external obliques. And it's bringing everything along. It's even having an impact, perhaps you'll feel it in sitting, perhaps you won't, on your pelvis. But it's turning your whole trunk. Same with the other side. You can put your hand there, follow the external obliques. You're rotating to the opposite side. Now, these are my external obliques. My internal obliques start attaching. They also attach to ribs through the belly of the muscle to the iliac crest, only they are turning me to the same side. They're turning me, if I'm turning to my left, they're turning me to the left. If I'm turning to my right, they're turning me to my right. The same on the other side. These are going this way. Internal obliques are turning me. This is my right side. They're turning me to my right. By their tendons, I am going from the midline in the front to the midline in the back. My external obliques on this side start bringing me towards my opposite hip. They stop at the midline and they are carried on in that same direction. Whoops, this way. They are carried on, let me turn this way, in the same direction to my midline in the back, where my external obliques pick it up and start turning me to the opposite side. It's like a big cummerbund all the way around for rotation. Now we can have rotation, that's ipsilateral rotation, all to the same side. Oh wait, let me do one more thing. Let me bring in a little bit with the scapula. So now I'm going to turn towards my opposite hip. If I turn, I'm turning from, you want to think about your lower ribs. You want to think about turning from your lower ribs. That at least that helps me to really engage in rotational movements, my obliques. I'm going to start turning to my opposite side. And then if I want to reach out, I'm now adding serratus anterior, bringing my scapula away from my spine. A lot of people just start in their shoulder girdle, and it depends how well organized they are, but they don't bring very much of their real trunk rotational movements in it. You want to turn from your somatic center and then add your shoulder girdle movements. You want to turn from your somatic center and add your shoulder girdle movements rather than starting here and not really getting your full rotation. Now, the obliques also attach to the pelvis. Only let me go about 3 more minutes, Isaiah, will you time me? So now, my feet are going to be stable on the floor. I know I get feedback. It really helps when I show my feet. Oh, overshot. Okay. Okay. All right. You can see enough of my head, I think. Now, if I bring one knee, my feet are going to stay stable. If I bring one knee forward, if I bring one knee forward, it brings my thigh, and this hemi-pelvis is my right hemi-pelvis forward. My left knee, thigh, and hemi-pelvis go back. And I can reverse that. Now I'm rotating my pelvis. My obliques are playing a big role, not the only role, because they attach to my pelvis. My obliques are turning my whole trunk, my pelvis, my somatic center, my rib cage. And my pelvis can move and have freedom of movement because of my muscle mobility, but also because I've got movement in my sacroiliac joints and in my pubic joints. Now, I'm going to take my shoulder girdle out. I can move contralaterally so that my obliques at the somatic center have to negotiate the change between the upper body going in one direction and the lower body in the other. Upper trunk meaning rib cage, lower trunk meaning pelvis, somatic center in the middle, figuring out how to negotiate the opposite move change. So I can't cover my microphone. So I'm just going to take my shoulder girdle out. Hold loosely, don't hold real tight. Let your shoulders be broad. Okay, now I'm going to, I'll start here. I'm going to bring this knee forward. It's going to turn my pelvis this way, and I'm going to come back with my upper body this way. I'm using my obliques to help me turn, and then I'm probably adding some shoulder girdle to turn opposite my pelvis. And my obliques know how to organize themselves with some other muscles, so I can turn in opposite directions with my upper and lower trunk like I need to do in walking, or I can turn all to the same side. So we have, these are very important muscles, and the oblique muscles are often have a lot of sensory motor amnesia, especially our internal obliques for more people, but both obliques often have a lot of sensory motor amnesia. Okay, let's go to the floor. So go ahead and set yourself up on the floor, on your back. And as you settle in, depends how ready you are to be on the floor. As you settle yourself in, just go ahead and do a little bit of a self-scan. And since we've already started movement, I'm not going to do an extensive body scan. It is wonderful to do an extensive body scan, but do enough body scan on your own until I start leading the first movement. It's no surprise, it's going to be arch and flatten. But for your body scan, your legs can be bent or they can be long. And you want to do, in this case, a fairly quick survey of yourself. Feel yourself yield into the floor. Feel the support of the floor. My lighting could be better, Isaiah. I don't know why I'm not getting better light on me. Can you help me adjust something? We'll get some better lighting. I don't know. The lighting went darker. I don't know. I think it's, yeah. And I think maybe this one too. Okay, good. All right. I think that's a little better, but we can adjust the lighting. I've got all these lights. Okay. So go ahead and bend one leg, put your foot intentionally where you want it. Bend the other leg, put your foot intentionally where you want it. And we're going to start with the concept of a pelvic tilt. Now, is that different than an arch and flatten? Not exactly, but I want you to get into I want you to get into the sense of a tilt. It's small. When you go into your arch or your anterior tilt, you want to try, when we just are talking about tilting the pelvis, see if you can bring your tailbone, roll towards your tailbone backward and just bring it towards your waist, not high. And then you'll come to your neutral. And then to tilt the posterior tilt, which is the flatten, where you gently contract your belly. See if you can just bring your pubic bone towards your belly button, towards your navel. And then you'll come to neutral. So we're focus on just a sense of tilting the pelvis. Tilt, anterior tilt, the top of the pelvis goes forward, tailbone to low back, to your waist, to neutral, to posterior tilt, the top of your pelvis goes backward, pubic bone to your navel, and then to neutral. And just do it very small and get a sense that you can control the tilting of your pelvis, because the control of the tilting of the pelvis is then embedded in all kinds of larger arch and flattens, arch and curl diet, all of those embed the pelvic tilt, but it starts with, can you control your tilting, the tilting of your pelvis? And again, in the sacrum, you have this nutation when you arch, tailbone to low back, that's nutation. The sacrum has a little bit of nutating movement. And when you posterior tilt, you counter nutate. and that's pubic bone to belly button. It's you've got more movement in the pelvis itself, but some movement in the sacroiliac joint. And we know also from past classes, if you've taken them, we have movement in our pubic joints. Okay, let's go to a larger but comfortable, whatever arch and flatten you like to do, where you inhale and arch, rolling towards your tailbone, and you exhale and flatten, contracting your belly, pubic bone to rib cage, and start adding your arms. Just, we're going to warm up is to add a few more parts, so that on the inhale arch, you roll your arms out, a brief stop at neutral, exhale, contract belly, pubic bone to rib cage, roll arms in, sink your chest, let your head and neck do whatever it wants to follow the movement to a brief neutral, and go ahead back and forth and combine your arch and flatten with rotation of the shoulder girdle and arm, shoulder girdles and arms. And now we're including more of our whole body in this movement. Bring it to a close on your next contract belly, the flatten phase, rolling arms into neutral. And let's add another piece, one leg at a time, lengthen your legs. Let's include the feet this time. I like this move. I like to teach this move because you can do it in bed really easily. And I often do. It's up to you if you want to even include the arms on this, but let's focus on the arch and flatten with the feet. So I'll just guide it in this particular pattern. It's not the only pattern. As you inhale and arch, you're going to point your feet and toes. You're going to include your toes and the whole foot. And then you're going to slowly come to your neutral, through your neutral. On an exhale, you're going to contract your belly, pubic bone to rib cage, and bring your feet and toes towards your kneecap, dorsiflexion. And then you'll slowly transition to your neutral, perhaps a brief pause. And inhale, arch, point your feet and toes. Slow down through your transition into exhale, flatten, dorsiflexion, toes and feet towards your kneecaps. And you can go back and forth, and I see some people doing some other really nice things with your arms. You can certainly on the arms, bring your arms all the way back to increase the arch. And on your flatten, you can bring your arms forward. You can do many patterns in your arms because we do many movements with our spine in different positions. So don't get locked into thinking you have to do only one pattern if it's arch and flatten. The light's not good again. I don't know. Can you see the darkness? Yeah. So I think it's coming from this light, needs to change. Anyway, maybe I need to go back. All right. So now let's just do the flower, arch and curl. I'll guide you through it. Bend one leg, intentionally place your foot on the floor. Thank you, Kelly Peacock, for really this intentional placing of the foot. Bend your other leg, intentionally place your second foot. Hands behind your head. If that's comfortable for you, you can prop your elbows up with pillows if it's not. And we're going to do what's called the flower, arch, and curl. I'll guide you through it. And this is going to involve sacroiliac joint and pubic joints. So I'll explain it. As you inhale and arch, your head is going to go back on this one, full back extension, elbows back only if it's comfortable, feet come closer together, knees spread outward. You're a flower, you're opening up, the flower is opening up. And then as you exhale and move into curl, contracting your abdominal muscles, your elbows come closer together, your knees come together, your feet splay outward, you're closing the flower. And you can go at your own pace. On an inhale, you're opening the flower, full spinal extension, head back, elbows back, if it's comfortable, feet together, knees out. Now, when you're in this position, feet together, knees out, you're gently compressing into your sacroiliac joints, but you're spreading your pubic joints. When you exhale and transition to curl, your hands help raise your head. I maybe forgot to say that as you contract your belly. Your elbows come closer together, knees together, feet out. When you're in this position, if you can pause for a moment in this curl position, closing the flower, now your sacroiliac joints have a spread in them. It's called distraction. There's more space in the sacroiliac joints, but your pubic joints are compressing in the front. So as you go back and forth, this is now a really nice full body movement. You may want to bring some of your attention into the area of your pelvis and see if you can notice if you're in the phase where your knees are spreading outward, you're compressing into your sacroiliac joints. Your butt cheeks are coming closer together. They're contracting. And your pubic joints in the front are distracting or spreading a little bit. When you're in the phase, on the curl phase, where your knees are gently coming together or even slightly squeezing feet out, you're creating space in the sacroiliac joints. You're compressing in the pubic joints. So complete your next curl and just rest for a moment. And we're going to go to the side lying position. And we're going to be in side lying for a while. You may choose the side you'd like to be on. I'm going to lead it in terms of what your top arm and leg are doing. Can't get the light. So weird. Okay. I don't know. Can you fiddle again? It's just not good light. No, it's not going. What about this thing? Okay, it's enough. I don't know. We're having trouble with the light this morning. Who knows? Let me see what happens if I go forward or back. It just seems to be changing. Okay, you're going to lie on one of your sides. Please have support under your head. Some people like a pillow. Some people like a pillow and their arm. I'm going to suggest more than just an arm because it usually still droops the head down, and I'm going to suggest the spine in your neck is very parallel with the ground. Okay. For today's lateral flexion, I'm going to have you, whichever arm is on top, bend your elbow, bring your fingers to your shoulders. Your upper arm bone is on your side. You're on your side, you're on your greater trochanter, you're on the bump on the bottom of the pelvis, you're on the side of your ribs, you're on the side of the neck. Really put yourself on your side. And let's just do a couple of regular lateral flexions from this position. You can raise your head or not. You're going to keep your knees together, bring your top foot up, that internally rotates your top thigh. To hike your hip, bring your armpit down, your ribs squeeze, your obliques on the side contract, slowly release. And see if you can go in the opposite directions. Contract your obliques on the bottom and lengthen. You can even lengthen your top leg. If you want, you can go into a lengthening the top leg straight down. You can either lengthen the arm or just lengthen the elbow up towards the ceiling. Come back to your neutral and repeat that one more time. I'm going to shorten my instructions. Foot up, hike your hip, elbow, armpit down, squeezing the ribs, contracting the ribs, between the ribs and the obliques. And then slowly release, brief neutral, and lengthen that side any way you'd like to lengthen that side. And come back, rest your top arm along your side for a moment. Okay, this is an enhancement of a lateral flexion that I think is super good, very important. I do it pretty regularly, maybe almost every single time I do my cat routine. And it's going to be, so on the regular lateral flexion that we just did, we were using the lateral fibers of the obliques, both the internal and external obliques. Now we're going to focus on either the external obliques or the internal obliques. So Once again, you're in the chair position on the side, approximately, very comfortable. Bring your fingers back up. I'm going to use my other side, so I do both sides as I'm leading it. Fingers to your shoulders, your elbow is hanging down on your side. So bring your upper arm down, let it hang. I see some elbows up in the air. See if you can relax it. Relax your upper arm along your side, fingers to your shoulder. Okay, now in your lower body, you're going to be doing the same thing. Knees together, top foot up to hike your hip. Just begin to side bend. Begin to bring your elbow down a little bit. And now bring your elbow towards your opposite hip. You're in your external obliques. Lead from your lower ribs and your elbow. Don't overdo it. And you're now doing the rotational function from the upper trunk area, somatic center, up to the rib cage of the external obliques, and come back to your neutral. If you add that little bit of, breathe any way you want for comfort, if you add a little bit of that lateral flexion, a little bit of that side bending, foot up to hike your hip, little bit of your armpit down before you start turning your lower ribs, your sternum, your elbow towards your opposite hip. Now you're really getting into those external obliques and the forward rotation, forward toward the floor for you, of your external obliques. It's a wonderful move, and go ahead and do that one more time. Foot up, hike your hip, start to bring your elbow and armpit down, but slide into the forward rotation from your external obliques. Lead with your elbow, your lower ribs, and then your sternum. Your head is following. So your nose turns down toward the floor as well, and then come back to center. Rest your arm long. Now we'll focus on internal obliques. Internal obliques, take it easy. Internal obliques have a lot of sensory motor amnesia for a lot of people, even more than the external obliques. So once again, your upper arm is resting on your side. Your fingers are to your shoulder. Just like we started before, fingers to shoulder, elbow bent. And you're going to bring your foot up to hike your hip. Start to laterally flex, start to bring your armpit and elbow down a little bit, and now rotate backward from your lower ribs as if you're going towards your opposite hip, but you probably won't go as far. You may or may not, but you're rotating, your head is following, your chest is opening up toward the ceiling, your face is turning in the direction of your turn, and slowly release back to your neutral. So you're from your somatic center up, you're turning from your internal oblique. Let's do it again. Foot up to hike your hips, start to laterally flex so that you start to really engage the obliques. And then as you start to engage the obliques, armpit and elbow down, you're going to turn backward from your lower ribs. You are in your internal obliques. Your external obliques may be helping, but we're trying to really reference muscle, focus on internal oblique function, chest more toward the ceiling, face is following your rib cage, and come back to your neutral and rest. Rest your arm, top arm along your side. Now, let's just work with our lower body for a moment. And we're going to alternate the lower body move from lateral flexion with the clam. So let's first start like we usually start, knees together, top foot up to hike your hip. You're doing an internal rotation of the hip and thigh. Slowly come down, not too slowly because we don't want to be fast, but we want to move along. And now keep your feet touching, bring your top knee up. Now you're doing an abduction external rotation. Your gluteal muscles are hopefully contracting, and you'll come down slowly, relatively slowly, and alternate that a little bit. So you're alternating foot up internal rotation, hike hip, and you're alternating that with the clam, feet together, top knee up. Your hip is actually getting longer, going a little bit backward. And come down. All right, we're going to do some combination moves with the obliques. We're going to do contralateral combination move with the internal and external obliques. So bend your elbow, your upper arm is along your side, your fingertips are at your shoulder. Okay, I'm going to syncopate this a little bit as you catch on. If you can do it simultaneously, great. If you can't, just syncopate it. Keep your feet together, bring your top knee up. And now in the upper body, start to bring your elbow and armpit down a little bit, but bring your lower ribs and elbow across towards your opposite hip towards the floor. Your head and neck are also turning towards the floor. Your chest is turning and sternum are turning toward the floor. Slowly come out of the whole pattern and give yourself a moment to rest and readjust, because you're going to do the opposite contralateral pattern. Whew, okay. This time, knees together, foot up to hike your hip. Start to bring your armpit and ribs down, but this time you're going to rotate backward from your lower ribs, internal obliques. Your chest is opening more towards the ceiling. Your face is following your rib cage. And slowly come out of the pattern to rest. We'll do one more set in each direction. Back to clam. So you're going to keep your feet together, knee up, and you're going to start to bring your elbow and armpit down towards your hip, and you're going to rotate forward, external obliques from your lower ribs and from your elbow. Your elbow in this position, I feel, really helps the obliques. Your chest is going more forward and downward. Your face is as well towards the floor. And then slowly you'll make your way back to neutral. These are great moves to practice, great enhancement for your basic cat routine. And last repetition for this one is foot up, hike your hip, start to bring your armpit and elbow down. But as you start to do that, you rotate backward, internal obliques from your lower ribs and your elbow. Your chest opens up, your face follows your rib cage. And slowly come back to center. And let your arm rest on the side. And we're going to move into the propeller on this side. And then we'll turn over and do both moves on the other side. The propeller. The propeller can be challenging, so take it easy. Let's work with the lower body first. So your arm can rest. You're going to straighten your top leg. You can either straighten your top leg and let your foot touch the floor, or you can straighten your top leg as if you're standing on it. You can do different versions. But your top leg is straight and downward, away from your face. All right, now, you're not swinging your leg. You're going to rotate your pelvis. So you're going to take your top hemi-pelvis. This is a lot of your obliques, some spinal muscles, and you're going to rotate your pelvis forward toward the floor, your top hemi-pelvis forward toward the floor, and it'll bring your leg a little bit forward. Just because your pelvis is moving forward, let your leg go with your pelvis. It's not a wild swing. It's a small move. Now, start to reverse. Start to rotate your pelvis backward. Let your straight leg come with your pelvis. It'll go a little bit backward, not because you're swinging it from the hip. You're not swinging it from the hip. You're letting your leg move with your pelvis. So bring your pelvis, rotate your pelvis forward. Obliques, external obliques are really helping to rotate that pelvis forward. Let your forward action of your pelvis bring your straight leg along just as far as it goes. Then As you rotate your pelvis backward, a lot of internal obliques, let it take your straight leg along. See if you can refrain from swinging your leg, but use your pelvis. Okay, come back to your neutral and rest for a moment. You can bend that knee, let it rest. We're going to add a little something to the propeller. Straighten your top leg. And this may merit watching this again and practicing. You're going to now add a slight rotation in the leg from the hip, but follow my instructions. Start in the pelvis. Rotate your top hemi-pelvis forward. Let your top leg come a little bit forward with your hemi-pelvis, and from the hip, internally rotate your top leg toes down or toward the floor. Now, as you start to rotate your top hemi-pelvis backward, your leg, you come out of the internal rotation, your top leg follows your top hemi-pelvis backward, your leg goes a little bit backward, and add from the hip a little bit of external rotation, toes more in the direction of toward the ceiling. So you're adding some rotational move, but it's not a swing, it's a rotational move, and it's usually not very big for most people. As you start bringing your pelvis forward, you're going to bring your leg will come a little forward with internal rotation. As you start rotating your hemi-pelvis backward, your straight leg will come out of the internal rotation. It'll go through straight to rotate, let your top leg rotate outward or backward a little bit, toes more toward the ceiling. And come back to neutral and rest. And rest your leg however you want to, bend it again. We're going to go to the upper body propeller. It's the same idea. It tends to be more challenging for people because of shoulder issues. Now, in a traditional propeller, your arm is pretty straight over your ear, but that's not comfortable for a lot of people. You can bring your arm straight towards the ceiling. You can bring your arm straight towards the ceiling. You can have your arm straight in whatever position, but your arm is straight. It is not bent at the elbow, so don't hurt your shoulder. Bring your straight arm anywhere away from your hip. It may go as far as towards the ceiling. It may even go as far as closer to your ear, but your arm stays straight. So find a comfortable position. Now, leave your arm there. From your external obliques and from your external obliques of the lower ribs, rotate your upper trunk and rib cage forward, and your arm just comes a little bit forward. You're not swinging it forward with your rib cage and sternum coming forward toward the floor in front of you. Your head follows. Now, come back to your neutral. And now start rotating at internal obliques from your lower ribs, and you're rotating your rib cage, whatever part of your somatic center is going, and your rib cage backward, and you're going to let your arm follow backward just to the extent that it's comfortable, and come back to your neutral and rest your arm for a moment. The propeller is for a straight arm, but don't hurt your shoulder. Bring it straight wherever you can. We're going to now add the rotational aspect. So straight arm, either towards your ear or towards the ceiling, whatever works for you. Straight elbow. Rotate from your external obliques, rotate from the lower ribs forward, your head follows, your arm comes a little forward. Add internal rotation, your palm will go away from you. Now you start going back towards your neutral. From your neutral, internal obliques, bring your lower rib cage backward. Your arm will go a little bit backward, and you're going to externally rotate your arm. Your palm is more facing your head. It's higher than your head, but towards your head. And then you'll make your way back to neutral. Now, you're going to external obliques. You're from the lower ribs. You're bringing your rib cage and sternum forward. Your head goes towards the floor. Your straight arm goes a little forward. Add internal rotation. Your palm is away from your head face. Make your way to your neutral, through your neutral. Internal rotation, internal obliques, rotate your rib cage backward from your internal obliques. Your arm will go a little backward. External rotation in your arm. Your palm will come more towards your face. And come back to your neutral and rest your top arm. It's a tricky move. If you get too fatigued, then just listen to the instructions, come back to it. Let's put the whole propeller together. It isn't that easy. You can syncopate it. As you get better at it, you can do it simultaneously. I can do it totally simultaneously on one side. Of course, I've done this on and off for a long time. On my other side, I have a lot more trouble. I have to syncopate it. It doesn't matter. Straight arm, straight leg. Your top leg is straight down. Your top arm is wherever you can get it straight. All right, let's start in the pelvis. You're going to rotate your pelvis backward. Your top leg, straight leg, is going to go a little backward with some external rotation in that leg from the hip. Your upper body is going to rotate from the lower ribs forward towards the floor. Your chest is coming forward toward the floor. Your arm is coming a little forward with internal rotation. Your palm is away from your face. You're going to make your way back to neutral. Now you're going to start rotating your pelvis forward. Your leg is going to come forward. Your leg is going to internally rotate at the hip. With your internal obliques, you're going to start rotating from the lower ribs backward. Your rib cage and sternum go backward. Your chest is going more towards the ceiling. Your face is opening up. Your arm swings backward, and you're going to add external rotation. Your palm is facing your head more. Come back to your neutral and rest. Roll onto your back for a moment. I wish I could do many more repetitions, but I want to get both of these moves in on both sides. This is the focus of today's lesson, is really getting those obliques differentiated, using the reference muscle of internal and external oblique in rotation. It works the rib cage, somatic center, and pelvis. And now make your way to your other side. We're going to go back to lateral flexion. You're on your side, basically your chair position. You're going to bend your elbow, keep your upper arm on your side, your fingertips towards your shoulder. And you're going to do 2 regular lateral flexions from this position. Let your head and neck be comfortable. You're going to keep your knees together, lift your top foot to hike your hip, bring your armpit and ribs down. You're on your lateral flexion. And as you slowly release, you're going to open up your top ribs and pelvis. You're going to contract the bottom hip up and bottom armpit down. You can open up your arm if you want. You can open up your leg if you want. And come back to your neutral. Elbow is bent on your side, fingers to shoulder. Feet, knees together, top foot up to hike your hip, armpit and ribs down. You're doing a regular lateral flexion. Rib cage is contracting, obliques, vertical fibers are contracting, and go into a lengthening, whichever way you can lengthen that side. Just give that side some nice lengthening. And now we're going to combine. The lower body is going to be the same. We're going to be combining our upper body using the external and internal obliques, but the lower body is going to maintain the position of foot up to hike your hip. So foot up to hike your hip. As you bring your armpit and elbow down, start to use your lower ribs to turn you forward, rotating forward toward the floor. Your face is following. Slowly come back to your neutral. We're going to use our internal obliques. Now we'll do some alternation. Foot up to hike your hip. I'm shortening the directions. Start to laterally flex, bringing your armpit and elbow down. Start to bring it down and then start using your lower ribs to contract internal obliques to rotate your rib cage backward. Your chest opens up, your face follows your rib cage. Slowly come back to your neutral. Let's do another repetition in both directions. You can adjust your arm if it's getting tired. Foot up to hike your hip. Start to laterally flex, armpit and elbow down. External obliques, rotating your rib cage and part of your somatic center forward toward the floor. Your chest is coming more towards the floor. Your face is coming more towards the floor. It's just a direction. Slowly make it back to your neutral. You can go at your own pace if you understand the move. And again, foot up to hike your hip. Internal obliques are going to take you backward from your lower ribs. Going backward, chest opening up, face opening up, and slowly come back to neutral. Excellent. Let's do this with the clam. So we're doing a contralateral rotation with both phases. So the clam is the knee up, and I'm just going to go right into the movement because of time. Okay, let's start with in the legs, in the pelvis downward, top leg with the clam. Bring your knee up and bring your hands are at your shoulders again. Bring your elbow and hip toward each other. And with the knee going up, you're going to direct external obliques, rotating your rib cage and trunk forward. Your head is following your rib cage, and come back to your neutral. Now you're going to do in the leg, foot up to hike your hip, armpit and elbow down to contract your ribs and obliques more. You're rotating from your lower ribs backward, internal obliques, and slowly come back to neutral and rest your arm along your side. It would be great to do a few more repetitions, but I hope you catch on to the pattern and you can start adding it. If you haven't caught on to the pattern without instructions, you can watch this on Tuesday. Isaiah will put this on all my YouTube, SoundCloud, website, etc. Okay, we're going to go to the propeller. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the time. I want to go to the propeller. So let's work with the lower body first. You're going to straighten your top leg straight down. You're going to do the rotation from the pelvis. Your straight leg is following the pelvis. It is not swinging from the hip more. So bring your top hemi-pelvis forward toward the floor and let your top leg follow a little bit forward with your top hemi-pelvis rotating forward toward the floor. Add a little bit of internal rotation to that leg, toes down. Come back to your neutral. Now rotate your top hemi-pelvis backward. You're balancing on your greater trochanter mostly and the bottom pelvis. You might go a little beyond it. That's okay. Rotating your pelvis backward, let your top straight leg follow the pelvis. It's not a very big move. External rotation, toes up with your straight leg. Come back to your neutral. Let's do one more repetition in each direction with that. Okay, rotate your top leg is straight, rotate your top hemi-pelvis forward toward the floor. External obliques are helping with that rotation of the pelvis. Your straight leg is coming forward with your forward pelvis, and you're going to internally rotate that leg at the hip, toes down. And come back to your neutral. Internal obliques will help you to rotate your pelvis backward. Other muscles are helping too. Your straight leg will go a little backward, rotate that leg at the hip, external rotation, toes more up towards the ceiling. And come back to neutral and just rest your legs. You can bend them again in a comfortable position. Let's work with the upper body propeller. Straight arm. Your arm can be close to your ear. Your arm can be straight up towards the ceiling. You find a way to have your arm straight where it is comfortable and not hurting your shoulder. And the more vertical it is in line with a vertical leg, the better it is. That's why it's better to have your straight arm more toward the ceiling than it is to slant it in front of you. But you know, you find your way with this. They're all good moves. Okay, so you're going to, from your external obliques, lower ribs, you're going to rotate your rib cage forward and part of your somatic center forward toward the floor. From your external obliques, your arm will come a little bit forward. Internally rotate your arm, palm is going away from your face. Come, keeping your arm straight, come to your neutral. Start rotating your rib cage backward from the lower ribs. External obliques, internal obliques, rotating you backward. Your arm starts going backward and you're going to do an external rotation. Your palm is going to face more towards your head. And then you're going to come back to your neutral. Let's repeat that. You're going to bring your rib cage forward, external obliques from your lower ribs. Your arm will follow, your straight arm will follow. Internally rotate your arm. And then you'll come back to your neutral. Then you'll bring your rib cage backward, internal obliques, rotating you to your same side. It's rotating you backward. And your arm goes a little backward, and external rotation. See if you can figure out what external or internal. Don't worry if you get confused, they're both good. And come back to your neutral and rest your arm. Let's put it together. Okay, straight arm, straight leg, protect your shoulder, do your straight arm in the position that's comfortable for you. You can syncopate it if you want. We're going to start in the pelvis, bring your pelvis, rotate your pelvis backward, your internal obliques, your leg will go a little backward, your leg externally rotates at the hip, toes towards the ceiling. You're going to bring your rib cage forward, your external obliques, your arm goes a little forward, your arm is going to internally rotate, palm away. Now you're going to transition, come back through your neutral, your leg and arm stay straight. Now, as your pelvis rotates forward, top hemi-pelvis rotates forward toward the floor, your leg goes a little forward, your leg internally rotates, toes down. Your rib cage rotates backward, external obliques, your arm goes backward, and it externally rotates, palm more towards the ceiling or face. Okay, see if you can on your own, and you can syncopate it, see if you can do it. If you can do upper body separate from lower body, but keep one in its position as you do the other. It takes I have found it takes quite a bit of practice, or it did for me. And if I haven't done it for a while, I have to practice it again. It's amazing. So if your top hemi-pelvis is going forward, your rib cage is going backward, your arm and leg are following. If whatever limb is going forward, that's an internal rotation. Whatever limb is going backward, that's an external rotation. See if you can do a set and then come to rest. No, you don't have to rush. Finish your set. If you want to keep practicing, the rest of us may want to turn on our back and rest. This was a lot to take in. But they're such lovely moves, and they are so helpful to so many problems in our body, from acute pain to chronic pain, to even working out problems in the limbs, all the way down to the feet and all the way down to the fingers. So come onto your back and rest. You deserve your rest. You can do a mini scan. How are you yielding into the floor? Let's bring this all together with the wash rag twist. So one leg at a time, bend your leg, intentionally place your foot. Bend your other leg, intentionally place your foot, your arms out comfortably. They can be shoulder height or lower or higher. You know, you can have them at different places. This is a version of Propeller, but it's in an easier configuration for the body to do. Knees left, face right. Right arm rotates outward, more palm up and beyond. Left arm rotates more palm downward. And reverse the pattern, knees right, face left, left arm rotates externally, palm up, right arm rotates internally, palm down. So go ahead and bring this together. This is a version of Propeller, but it's a little easier in this position. And with your lower legs bent, it's easier. And we're going to do a variation. Of course, we're going to do a variation. Okay, and here's the variation. It's a lot of fun. Bring your knees to neutral. Let me start off so I get the directions correctly. Then you can go at your own pace. All right. You're going to turn your face to the right. Your right arm is going to externally rotate, palm up. Your left arm is going to internally rotate, palm down. Let's see, palm up. And your knees are going to go to the left. And as your knees go to the left, take your top right leg and just straighten it out diagonally kind of over your other leg. And then bring that foot back down to the floor. And as you reverse the pattern, both knees to the right, that left top leg is going to go straight, but the upper body is going to do the regular upper body twist. You're just adding a little variation by straightening the top leg diagonally as you go back and forth. The leg bends, the foot comes back, and it's very nice. It's kind of a propeller because you've got a straight arm and straight leg, but this time it's opposite arm and leg coming through the somatic center. Well, both arms are working, but you've got you've got a straight arm and leg, but they're on opposite sides of the upper and lower body. It's a kind of a fun variation to do. There's so many different variations you can start coming up with. Come back to your neutral, keeping your knees bent. Let's end this part of it like we began with the pelvic tilt. You're going to do an arch and flatten, but you're going to focus on the tilting of the pelvis. So when you inhale and arch, your tailbone comes down. It's as if your tailbone and your low back are coming closer together. It's a very low, low arch. And then as you transition through your neutral, contracting your belly, pubic bone towards navel. You're now tilting in a posterior tilt, the top of your pelvis going backward. Go back and forth and really focus on the anterior tilt is the arch, and the posterior tilt is the contract belly flatten, but it's small. And now rest in a position of comfort any way you want your legs and your arms. And just enjoy the support of the floor. And once again, we'll end the floor part of the class with the heart math, I guess you'd call it a meditation. You can have your legs any way you want. You can have your arms any way you want. You start slowing your breathing down. It might already be somewhat slower. You slow your breathing down. You lengthen your exhales. So just take some breaths. You slow your breathing down. You lengthen your exhales over your inhales. You can place your hands on your heart. I think it's a nice thing to do because it brings you back into your heart, like your heart chakra. And as your breathing is slower with your hands on your heart, you bring a sincere, regenerative emotion into yourself, like gratitude or appreciation, maybe for a person or a pet, or something like a beautiful walk in the garden or at the beach, a beautiful sunset or sunrise, whatever feels good to you, that feels regenerative, feels like the thought you'd like to maybe put a little extra energy in. Maybe you're thinking about somebody you're caring for, a parent, a friend, a pet. And with your hands still on your heart, just bringing in, or where it's comfortable, some people like the solar plexus better. You're just bringing in that regenerative emotion. Let your arms come back down to your sides, go back into quiet breathing. We're going to be getting up, but turn onto one of your sides. You may want to rest on your side, support your head. You may want with your arm or a pillow. You may want to rest on your side just a little bit. It's a lovely position to rest in, and sometimes it feels more restful to change your rest position. Really feel the side of your ribs, the side of your head, whatever it's against, the side of your pelvis, the side of your bottom leg, bottom foreleg, bottom lateral foot. And slowly make your way to standing. We'll stand for a moment and get our bearings, and then we will take a little bit of a walk. Just slowly make your way to standing. In standing, find your vertical height, find your feet. Just take a moment. You might be a little warbly. Your feedback from your muscles has changed. The feedback from your muscles has changed. Sometimes I have to lift one foot and then the other, even in standing, just to move a little bit and then get quiet again to find my standing verticality. And then go ahead and take a little walk. Let your arm, if you have room to let your arms swing, just comfortably. Contralateral walking, opposite arm and leg, but feel that contralateral rotation in the trunk. Your pelvis goes in one direction, your rib cage in the opposite. Your somatic center negotiates that change. That change is being guided by the obliques, a lot by the obliques, also your rectus abdominis, also some of your spinal muscles. but your rotation in your rib cage and in your pelvis, a lot is taking place through your internal and external obliques. And that is going to officially end our class today. Of course, I'm going to stay after class for discussion. I am now going to end the recording.